Welcome to this episode of SDI Encounters, a podcast from SDI, the home of spiritual companionship. I'm Matt Whitney. Thank you for listening. Learn more about our work and the work of spiritual companionship on our website, sdicompanions.org. Filmmaker, writer, and spiritual director M Freeman works at the intersections of reckoning and resiliency, queerness and film, and contemplative, creative, and social art practices. They are the author of The Illuminated Space, a personal theory of contemplative practice of media arts, published by The Third Thing. And they are the creator of Cinema Divina, a practice of using film as contemplative experience. And I got to sit with M in person recently. I traveled to Olympia and we had a lovely day together. We sat down and recorded this conversation in person. M is going to be sharing their Cinema Divina practice with the SDI community in a two-part webinar happening in January 2026. We hope that you will take a look, and we hope that you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation around how M came to understand their own spirituality through art making, through film, through experiences of reality with a capital R. We had a really beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful to have had it and to share this with you. So enjoy. Okay, good. Well, I am in M Freeman's studio in Olympia. It's such a delight to be with you in person. It's been such a joy.
I love having you here. It's really fun to meet you in person.
Yes.
I have to say that I'm really glad that I asked you over Zoom before we got together today about how tall you are. Like, what was it?
Yes, I prepared you in advance. You were like, "Are you a tall person?" Okay, just so I know.
And you didn't disappoint. Definitely tall. It was great to pick you up at the train station. It's really sweet to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I was telling you, it's one of the joys of like working for SDI is, we do so much online programming, and I get to know people over Zoom. Or just like corresponding digitally, and then occasionally I get the opportunity to meet someone in the flesh, and so here I am with you. This is
so lucky me.
Yes, lucky me.
Yeah.
And so I know you, and I think we actually met on Instagram, and I knew you were a spiritual director and a filmmaker, writer, like lots of different kind of hats that you wear. But maybe, you came in, maybe we'll get to this a little bit, but the webinar we did around creative arts last year. But would you share a little bit about how you got into spiritual direction and what called you to that work and, your training and things like that?
So I really didn't even think about doing spiritual direction until probably, I want to say it was probably in 2015. Where one of the folks I know from Simon involved with St. Placid's Priory, which is located in Lacey, Washington. It's only about 10 minutes from where I live in Olympia, 10 minutes by car. And that is a women's monastery of Benedictine sisters. And I'm part of a community of lay people, I guess you call us, that are involved with, so I'm part of the community that's involved with St. Placid's Priory. As an oblate, which makes me seem super Christian and very Catholic, which I really isn't how I really identify. But it's.
Can I ask you real quick, what is an oblate?
Yeah, I was just pausing to say, should I try it? So an oblate, the Benedictine communities have oblate communities, and that is an organized. It's a way of organizing for people who are not religious, like not sisters or priests, but are just living in the world.
Yeah.
To organize around the rule of Saint Benedict. So the rule of Saint Benedict is at the heart of the oblate communities, and there are oblate communities around the world.
Yeah.
And I became acquainted with this monastery in Lacey, 10 minutes from where I live, really by accident. I was there actually invited to participate in a kind of writing workshop thing that was going on there. It just so happened the person organizing it was just renting space at the monastery. But we were, as people participating in something at the monastery, we were invited to have lunch in the dining hall with the sisters on that particular Saturday of that weekend. And at that lunch, so I hadn't been around nuns since grade school because I went to Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And to be honest, Matt, I was a little nervous. Like it had been a while.
Yeah.
Like, and I knew I would be sitting around maybe near nuns. And I just, I really hadn't had any, this will probably sound corny or really that I could feel a little bit nervous, but it had been slightly traumatic earlier in life. And so I was a little not at ease. And at that lunch, so this is like early 2000s, like 2002 or 2003. I did happen to be seated right next to, because it was like family style. And it turned out the person I'm sitting next to was one of the sisters at St. Pleasant Priory, who, as it turns out, became my first spiritual director and was for many years until she became ill during the pandemic. And at that conversation with her, it was a life-changing conversation. I learned, it was the first time the word contemplative really came into my sphere. And she, when I asked her about how her days were, like what did she spend her time doing, and in addition to a lot of prayer, the liturgy of the hours, she said that she was a spiritual director, and I was like, what's that? So she tells me about that, and I was like, oh, so I could just contact you. And she was like, yes, and she gave me her card later, and it was probably a few months after that I did contact her for my first spiritual direction session. So I'll fast forward then a few years. So then I became an oblate later, where I became familiar with sort of that Benedictine community. And I love the sisters at St. Placid Priory. They're amazing women. They're the most quietly radical women I've ever met. I think I've met a lot of people at this point in life.
Yeah.
And they're just amazing. It's an amazing community. And our oblate community is just remarkable. They're probably about 80. They're like, I think 80 people, at least a few more than 80. And really at any given meeting, we probably are usually running pretty close to at least 50 people.
Yeah.
We meet monthly, and every season we kind of pick what we're going to focus on. But basically, the idea with the oblate community is to focus on the role of St. Benedict. When you read early translations of it, it's very problematic in terms of gender, blah, 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 but I love the role of Benedict. I love it. It's a beautiful way to live. And I take it very seriously, even though there's a lot I don't identify.
Yeah. So what stands out? What is it about the rule of Benedict that you have resonated with or carried with you?
Yeah. Well, hospitality is a charism of the Benedictines. And I guess that issues, from St. Benedict. And there's a chapter, I think it's chapter 72, that's called The Good Zeal of Monks. Or I don't know if that's the chapter of the title, but it's very near the end of the book. And there's a line in that, there are different lines in the rule that I'll think about. They'll just come to me during the day, any given day. And the line is, be the first to show respect. Really a simple guideline to live by, not always easy.
Yeah.
But I'll think about it when I'm walking down the street, at times in certain situations, I'm getting not a great vibe from somebody, right. Or at an intersection where I'm waiting to cross the street and there's, a really gigantic pickup that's doing a lot of engine gunning and I'm feeling bad vibe. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then I think, be the first to show respect.
See, it's that connection to that would have sounded like, good manners maybe, but when you connect it to the notion of good zeal, there's a real power and agency there, a good energy almost.
I agree. I think that's very perceptive. There is, it's deep. It's deep. So that's one example. And I've learned, like, there's also a line, the prologue alone in the Rule of Benedict is worth living by. And there's a line in there about, oh no, I think it's chapter 4. Remind yourself daily that you are going to die.
I've been thinking about that one myself lately, actually, separately. But go on.
And then in the prologue, this has become a very important thing in life for me. It's about, there's a line, which I think is, for Benedict, it was derived from scripture. I don't know scripture that well, but make peace your quest and aim. Make peace your quest and aim. And that has become a really, important, the combination of just like the lines I've shared with you here.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And then it's really amazing to be with people who are kind of sharing that, way of kind of being in the world and engaging in the world. And people that are in all different stages of sort of belief or non-belief or spirituality or, that make up the oblate community.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it.
Cool. What a beautiful relationship you have with them. You said that they're amazing women. I wonder if there's anything in particular that makes them amazing to you.
There's a lot. So I'm trying to think, like, what is it really? I think they are the most, just as a group of people, they are incredibly open-hearted and wholehearted.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I know that it has to be difficult to live in a community and make that work.
Yeah.
And so I have individual relationships with different members of that community, each of whom has had a unique kind of effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so altogether, it's just very powerful.
Yeah.
Sister Lucy was the person that, I know we're going to talk a little bit about Cinema Divina, but, for example, Sister Lucy is a person that's had a huge influence or been really important to my life in terms of my kind of bringing together my spiritual life and my creative life.
Mm-hmm.
So I have tons to be grateful to those women about. And they are very quiet. When I say quietly radical, I mean that they hold space in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Through their monastery, their presence, their spirituality center, for a lot of wonderful things to happen. And a variety of people.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And you asked the question about how did I become a spiritual director? So there was a person in my oblate community that had done spiritual direction at the Hezekiah School of Spiritual Direction in Tucson. Yeah. And that was before St. Cletus Priory, the Spirituality Center, was teaching spiritual direction. They do that now at the Priory, but they weren't yet. And a friend came back from that, and they were like, from my oblate community, and they were like, you really should do this. And I was like, be a spiritual director? So it was like, anyway, this person, drew from different things from my background and said, no, I think you really ought to think about this. And so I did start thinking about it and talked to my own spiritual director about that then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so things just sort of added up to like, yeah, maybe I will. And I could do the training. It's in basically listening, which would never be a bad thing to get better at. So I have nothing to lose and only something to gain by doing the training. So
yeah, the listening, that is like the rare skill in the world today in the zeitgeist, right? Feels like we need more of that. But and also Teresa Blythe teaches that or runs that program. Really?
Well, Teresa Blythe was one of the program coordinators when I attended. Teresa Blythe and Father Greg Wiest. It was at the Redemptorist Center in Tucson, Arizona. Teresa, there have been changes for who's running the program now and stuff. I taught some segments in it occasionally since then. Yeah. But Teresa does still run a spiritual direction program. And she does it, I think, with another person. I think she calls it like spiritual direction apprenticing or something. Mm-hmm. And I love Teresa Blythe. Let me just say right here, she is actually
we love her.
I go to her for supervision.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took me like 8 years, and then I realized like, I really do think I need a supervisor for real. And, I contacted Teresa. It had been a while. And, I think, how long has it been? So it was like, 6 years before. Anyway, contacted her out of the blue and was like through her website. I was like, I think I need supervision like right now. She made an appointment that
was like urgent.
Yeah, it was kind of urgent, and it was amazing. And so Yeah, PT media with her.
Beautiful.
She's amazing.
Yeah. She's like, just her life is dedicated to advocating for this work in the world. It's great.
It really is. And she was a great teacher, and she is a fantastic supervisor.
Good. Yeah. Well, let's talk about your creative life. Because you went to art school and you were in television and you're a filmmaker, kind of painting the broad picture. But what would you like to share about that work before we come to like the intersection of these things?
Oh, well, maybe, I did go to the Cornish School of Arts many decades ago, which is
that's a preface like that.
which is and I still love Cornish. It's just all anyway. And I kind of accidentally found my way into the theater department, which was at that point a professional actors training program. And I kind of accidentally found my way in because I accidentally ended up in a rehearsal hall at Bellevue Community College, where it turned out that this guy was directing a play, was part of the Empty Space Theater Company in Seattle, and he was part of the new faculty at Cornish. And so I went from sort of planning to paint sets at Bellevue Community College for production to ending up acting in this particular production we were doing called Hot Down Baltimore. And then it wasn't long after that I auditioned for what was then the new theater department, or the newly reestablished theater department at Cornish. So I studied acting, and I didn't really come from a family that like where creativity was like a thing. We didn't really. No, we said the rosary in my family regularly, but we didn't really talk a lot about creative life and stuff. Although my mother was very crafty. She did craft stuff, but she didn't call it creative. I think like survival stuff and all that. Like lots of sewing and darning and things like that. And anyway, so it was sort of, I was kind of a black sheep in the family for a lot of reasons, and ending up in a theater program was I did get often asked, how are you going to make a living?
Yeah.
I didn't really worry about it then. It was in the 1970s. It's just easier to make a living then.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Later, much later, I ended up, in sort of the advent of cable TV in New York. I'd moved to New York City. So that's how I really ended up getting into media production. And that was an incredible time of life and a great way to learn about media production. And but along the way I kept having this urge that was like, I wonder if there's any, and this is even before, I was a sort of runaway Catholic for a long time, and so I was like, but I always had a deep spiritual life, or felt like I did.
Yeah.
And I always kind of wondered about more feeling, wanting to feel real purpose in the work I was doing. And I think that was sort of a guiding question I had for many years. And I can remember, doing like, writing out sort of at the, New Year's, things like goals and dreams and things like that. And like articulating, even in writing, like I really wish I could integrate my spiritual life and my creative life. So like, because as a filmmaker, as a media artist, I went from theater school to ending up involved in television. And then when I left New York, I was still doing video work. And my thing at that point, so I was doing, I went to work creating a video production facility for the state of Washington. So I was a public servant. And I was always able to kind of keep practicing my craft creatively. So I was still making short, working with the craft of, telling a story by film or video. And so I always felt like I was always finding myself in positions to continue to work at the craft that I was, spending a lot of time, on my free time.
Yeah,
right. It's where I was really doing my work, in little bits and ways.
What were you doing as your work, your personal creative work?
I was starting to make short films. I was always kind of writing, not publishing necessarily, but writing. So I was always writing, always kind of making little films and, or writing scripts and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I want to ask you first is like, how How do you define the spiritual life? Like when you talk about, wanting to bring to, like recognizing that you are living a spiritual life, like what does that mean to you?
That is a great question. This is what it means to me. I didn't have these words for most years until I met Evelyn Underhill. Evelyn Underhill.
There's piles of books of Evelyn Underhill's on M's desk. So there you go.
Yeah, and I really came across Evelyn Underhill like 4 years ago or something like that. Anyway, she has this line in the book. There's an essay at the beginning of this book, Mysticism. The first essay is, what is mysticism? And by page 2 of the essay, she defines that, which is the thing I love about her writing. And she defines mysticism as union with the art of union with reality. Mysticism is the art of union with reality. And for me, that is like says everything for me about spirituality.
Yeah.
It really does. And I mean, and mysticism means something to me at this point because of contemplative practices. And I'm very lucky to have had great teachers who I still have in contemplative practices. And I'm talking about the sisters at St. Placid's Priory.
And contemplative practices like
lectio Divina.
Yeah.
Again, my very first spiritual direction session that I had with my spiritual director at St. Placid's. I set up a session with her because at that lunch that day, when I asked her, I said, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? She was really like open-hearted, warm, and wonderful. She's like, yeah, sure, ask me anything. So, well, what do you do all day? And she said, well, we spend a lot of time in prayer. And I said, like, when you say you spend a lot of time, I mean, are you saying that you spend a lot of time, like, saying the Hail Mary and the Act of Contrition, these Catholic prayers that I grew up with? And she said, no, not really. She said, I'm talking also about contemplative prayer. And I had never heard that phrase. And I don't even know if the word contemplative was even, I don't even know if I'm sure I'd never used that word.
Yeah.
I'd heard, contemplate things, right? But contemplative prayer. And I said, what do you mean by contemplative prayer? And she mentioned then lectio Divina, which was the first time I'd ever heard those words.
Mm-hmm.
She very briefly described it to me. And she said, that's an example of a contemplative way of praying, contemplative practice. And I said, is that something you can teach other people? And she said, oh, I do teach other people. And I said, would it be possible for you to teach me? And she said, I'd be happy to teach you. And again, that's where it all kind of started.
Yeah.
And so in my first spiritual direction session with me, it was a lot about talking sort of where I was at, which was, trying to find my way, right? I definitely don't believe, this is me then, definitely don't believe in any God that I was raised with. Not sure I believe in God at all. Big into art, creativity, that kind of thing. And I said, I'm very interested in this idea now of contemplative prayer. Like, I want to know about that. Something in me is just really alive, just even hearing those, comes to life, just hearing those words. And I said, I want to learn, I would love to learn about the practice that you mentioned at that lunch. And she said, so we started talking about lectio Divina. She talks me through the steps of it and so forth. And I said, yes, I'd love to learn this. And she said, well, the next time we meet, why don't you bring like a poem or something? It was, something that was often practiced with scripture, still is, sacred text. She said, bring a poem you really love, and we'll work with that. And so this is the other thing about, you might have to cut a lot of this.
No.
It's going to be way too long.
Yeah.
She says, when we went to schedule the next session, Sister Mary Giles says, I said, yeah, let's schedule another session. And she goes, okay. And she says, so let's say I was seeing her in April. She like turns to May, and she's like, well, you want to meet? And when is good for you in May? And I'm like, that's a month away. I'd like to meet you next week. And she said, really? We usually do spiritual direction like once a month. And I said, I'd rather do it every week right now for a while.
Wow.
She said, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did every week with her for several weeks at least.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I work with directees now, I always recommended people, we do at least 2 sessions you know, two sessions within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, or 3, depending. But I feel like it really establishes a really great sort of foundation and a rhythm, an understanding of it. So I did it several weeks in a row with her. And when I came to the second session to learn Lectio Divina, I brought a Rumi poem. And the poem I brought was Be Melting Snow, which I am unable to recite to you right now. And as far as I can remember, I know that we did the first stanza of that poem, and maybe only that, maybe 2. And I had a really profound experience from the get-go with Lectio Divina. I mean, it was almost like having visions. I mean, I was in a little room with her for spiritual direction, and she was guiding me through the steps, and it was evening and nice lamplight, like all the conditions were kind of wonderful. And I had a very profound, highly visual, very emotional, like not make me cry or sob kind of emotional, but very like reality with the capital R, the way Evelyn Underhill talk about it.
Yeah.
And I was just like blown away by that, and very open with Sister Mary Giles about the effect it was having on me. And so I was like kind of all in, like if I wasn't already, I was for sure. And when I left that experience that night, I walked to my car in the parking lot at the monastery. And when I was like, it was a beautiful evening. And I remember getting in the car and I closed the door and I said this out loud. Wow, I could do this with film. This meaning Lectio Divina. I could do this with film. And then I said, no, I have to do this with film. And then I said, Cinema Divina. That's what I need to do, is Cinema Divina, which took me like 5 years to unpack, or 4 years or something like that. I didn't really, it was, I really had to discover what that meant. But I began really practicing Lectio Divina with the guidance of Sister Mary Giles and then Sister Lucy. And, from Lectio Divina, I learned other practices as well.
Yeah.
And began using Lectio Divina in my filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. So were you bringing films that you were making to your spiritual director and practicing that way, or were you doing it on your own?
Oh, I was just doing it on my own.
Wow.
I mean, I was kind of stumbling my way into it initially, like starting to use the steps of Lectio Divina to, write things that I would end up using for voice, kind of the poetry or essay work that I would end up using as voiceover stuff. And then I would like find myself filming in a different way. This is like the work on my own, and how I'd put things together. And definitely when I was editing, in the last stages of the production. And then I was doing a late in life graduate degree at Goddard College in interdisciplinary arts, and I had to do a practicum. And since I had the Cinema Divina idea baking, I decided to do my practicum, to do Cinema Divina as my practicum, like begin making some Cinema Divina films. And so I did make some short films then, the first of the Cinema Divina films, through this process, a very rigorous process on my end of the filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then those films were screened. We screened those films in the Spirituality Center at St. Placid's with different groups that were meeting there regularly. Mm-hmm. So I did the screenings using the Lectio Divina process. So it was a contemplative screening process with a film made for that reason. So the films that I make for Cinema Divina are made through a contemplative practice for a contemplative practice. And to get to do those screenings in a group setting is just, kind of unparalleled, the way doing any kind of contemplative practice with a group can be.
Yeah, it's magical. And I want to ask you about just the sort of what it is that the Cinema Divina practice sort of offers somebody, what is the affect of it and the experience of it. But maybe we can even just back up to Lectio Divina, and like what I imagine most people listening know what it is, but if you didn't know what Lectio Divina is, like how would you describe it as a practice?
So Lectio Divina is considered a contemplative practice. And let's just say what's a contemplative practice?
Yeah.
I mean, I think of a contemplative practice as the kind of practice that facilitates a direct experience with the divine. Mm. That's one simple way to put it. That a contemplative practice, you don't need to be, in the company of a priest or anybody else.
Yeah.
and this is a practice, contemplative practice that you can do those on your own, a variety of contemplative practices. And you can often, if you're in communities where people are practicing, you can do these practices together. So that's contemplative practice, direct connection or direct active access with the divine, like feel or hear the divine speaking. However you define that, the divine, God, goddess, benevolence is my favorite. But however you define reality with capital R, really speak through you, through the practice. So with lectio divina, there are often four steps. They're slightly different modifications to the lectio divina. The way I learned lectio divina and the way I continue to practice is with four steps. And I'm just going to translate them from the Latin. So lectio divina means sacred reading. The second step is meditatio, so it's reflection. The third is oratio, which is about response. I'm going to talk about that word in a minute. And then contemplatio, to contemplate or rest. So these four steps. So I think of them as read, reflect, respond, and rest. You think of those. And that's a really easy shorthand for me, like if I'm filming,
Yeah.
And so there's this repetition, right? That's part of the beauty of it. So with my Rumi poem in that first session, I read through it a couple times just for the initial reading, step one. I read through it a second time for a more deeper reflection. What other associations came up for me? Like what feelings, what emotions? And then the third step was about, this response also kind of activates as an invitation, like what do you feel invited to, or what do you feel, how the divine is speaking to you, what is the deeper wisdom inviting you to? And I really love this part of lectio divina. To me, that's where really the magic is. And then to rest in that experience. And this third step is where I think the third step is like such a game changer in life. So this is where, like, if you do lectio divina in a lived way, you come out of a target really upset because something really stupid or awful happened in there, let's say. That this can happen in spiritual direction, where people come into spiritual direction with something that they haven't yet resolved in therapy, something that's really nagging them. And I've said, you want to do lectio divina on that? And I will guide them through a process about some lived experience that's kind of a knot.
Wow.
And it's the third step. It's like getting to so they'll recap it.
Yeah.
And then they'll do it a second time, and other things. Oh, yeah, it does remind me of that feeling when I was 4 years old, or like as 10 years old. People make associations. And then in the third step, like, what invitation do you feel? And that is such magic, because everything becomes a possibility. Then it's like everything opens up, like so much of the trouble part can just sort of drop away for a minute. Like, what is the invitation from?
Our contemplative community is sustained by its members. Anybody can become an SDI member. Benefits include discounts on courses, webinars, and conferences, access to our flagship publication, Presence Journal, and a public profile on our Find Spiritual Director or Companion Guide. Learn more about membership on our website. Buy or renew your membership at sdicompanions.org.
What were we talking about?
We're talking about contemplative experience and getting in touch with capital R reality, which is such a piercing concept. So we've unpacked the process of lectio divina. So Cinema Divina.
Yes.
Maybe talk about that practice.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Cinema Divina is an integration of my spiritual contemplative practices and my creative practices. Mm-hmm. So as a writer and filmmaker, I'm really integrating those parts of my practice with this contemplative practice. That is really how I work with lectio divina in a creative way. And then there's also the screening part, which I also the films, I make those films first and foremost to be used in a contemplative practice, screening practice. So Cinema Divina is really the making of and the sharing of the films in this contemplative way. That's really it in a nutshell. It's contemplative films made through and for contemplative practice.
Yeah. And you have been offering Cinema Divina through the Priory and through your own work. And I think you did a thing at the Fry Art Museum in Seattle. Like, you've been inviting people to do this practice with you in a public way.
Yes, and people contact me, like they'll find out. And so people have like rented the films from me who are practice at Lectio Divina to screen them in different settings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they'll do Cinema Divina themselves with your films?
They'll do the screening part. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that has happened through different associations, and different people will contact me like because of their, some initiative they have going on in their church, or they'll want to use something for a retreat or something like that. So the films have a life like that beyond my direct work with them, which I love. So the films have this ongoing life.
Yeah.
So there are people using the films that way, and which I love. And then the films also, not all of them, but some of them are really play well at film festivals. Mm. So a number of my Cinema Divina films are in festivals at different places in the world. Yeah, there's a Cinema Divina film that's showing in Montreal. That's one, and one in Portland. And, yeah.
That just must be so affirming just to have your work out there in the world being screened in these ways.
It's really interesting how that work, which is very spiritually grounded, has life in these different arenas. I do find it really intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and beautiful.
And so you are bringing the Cinema Divina practice to SDI. You actually have done it before. You hosted a session for our creative arts webinar last fall 2024. And so we're going to do a webinar series online with the spiritual direction community at SDI, doing Cinema Divina. These are my hopes for it, or at least this is what I think is like really special about what you do and what you bring. Is that you are a spiritual director. So you know that work, and you know what it is to practice deep listening and non-judgmental presence with people. You are an artist, and I'm an artist, and I just have always felt like art invites that experience of the numinous, or the reality with a capital R, right? Or making it, right? You're also a maker. You make art. Yeah. You have this foundation of like religious language and practice and contemplative practice that you have adapted, like not just adapted. It's not like you've taken it, but it's like, I want to call it like a malleable thing, but you have made it your own, and you have like woven it into all these other parts of you. And now can like offer it as an act of service to people. And that's really beautiful. That it's just this like really beautiful weaving of making beautiful films, and just your own loving heart and your experiences in the world. And like you have found this craft for it. But I also want spiritual directors, people who do the webinar, like I want them to experience it and enjoy it and appreciate it. But I want them to feel, I hope that people feel empowered by it. Empowered that like you have found this really unique way of being a creative spiritual companion in the world. And that we all have that capacity.
Yes. I was just going to say, it really is contagious.
Yes.
It really is contagious, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something about, being with you today, getting to have the conversations that we've been having before we started this one, which is, it's inspiring. You inspire me. And, suddenly reflecting in the middle of a conversation about a poet I'd never heard of, and a line from that poetry. Those moments are so beautiful, and it's just inspiring. And it's, and so we have, I think we walk around as humans partly always longing, for deep experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I think maybe that isn't true for everybody, but a lot of the people I come in contact, that is something common I experience with people, that we're all sort of longing for deep connection.
Yeah.
And so when we bring ourselves into any setting with that kind of intent, that kind of interest, that kind of openness, we will be affected.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the beauty, like, of group contemplative practices, that you get to be in a group with everybody's kind of there with this shared common intention. It's sort of reverent,
Yeah.
And so it is a really beautiful space for much to happen, and we will be affected by it. We will be changed. I mean, I love doing Cinema Divina screenings with people, because people come with that kind of open hearts. They want to have an experience. There's usually a common feeling of, wanting to be affected. And then to have that happen with a group of people. And then what's happening in group practice is, if there's any sharing among people, everybody affects everyone. Like,
yeah.
The thing that Barbara said really or the thing that, Larry said, or whatever, you hear it, how we really affect one another. And I just think that's really beautiful. And I agree that we all have that. Everybody has that capacity to unlock their own creativity, however that's manifest, if it's in cooking or painting or, like, I wish I was, if in another life I'd want to be a singer, sing it. And the people that just sing, in choirs and stuff like that, like, can really sing, like, whatever the thing is, raising kids, and the art of that, like, there's like the difficulty of it, right? And the challenges of it. And then there's also the art and beauty of it, like, whatever those things are, where your creativity.
Absolutely.
And in all those places.
Yes. Yes. That's been my life's work. It's like helping people see that. It's interesting. It just makes me think of.
Has that been your life's work? Helping people see that?
Yeah. I mean, so I want to tell you about this grad school experience that I had.
Yeah.
It was the MFA exhibit. I was graduating. It was very like interactive and experiential. People had to actually like take these things that I had made and do things with them. And I was talking with my advisor about it, and I was like really nervous. I was just like, I don't know, like, are people going to get it? Like, and I said something like, I don't know what's going to happen. And she said to me, something will happen. And I just shattered all that anxiety. It was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but something will happen. Right. And that's like, I think it speaks to that openness that you were talking about. Like, if you just go in, like, something will happen here, then it will. Like, that does manifest those experiences. And I feel like we could have a whole other conversation about, like, does everybody like want that for themselves? Yeah. I believe they do, but not everyone agrees with me on that. But I think we have a hunger for experiencing reality with a capital R. I mean, why are we alive? What's the point?
When we have that experience of reality with capital R, it's so beautiful and overwhelming. I used to think that we really, it's not, and people would say, is it possible to live in that state? Like, and I'm talking about right now, like, where you're, and I used to think it wasn't, like, how could it be? I actually don't believe that anymore. I think, yes, I think it is possible.
You really?
I really honestly do. Because why not? Why would I live my life thinking that's not possible? I mean, I don't even want to spend my life thinking that's not possible.
Yeah.
Like, I at least want to live my life thinking. And now, I mean, I feel it. Like, it feels pretty possible. I feel it's possible,
It does, talking to you. Yes, whether it's a sustainable, like, in every moment, that kind of experience is different, I think. But I mean, at least the possibility of that is enough.
I mean, I don't know. So let's take difficult moments. So, I mean, when Rudolf Otto talks about, in the idea of the holy, when he talks about the numinous, it's not just all party time. The numinous, there's mystery and even terror, in the uncanny, in those experiences. But I don't think that So I think even in our I think even in our challenging experiences, we can find ourselves in the numinous.
Yeah, I agree. But I think most people will understand listening, through difficulties. Our difficulties stretch us, they enlarge us. We recognize that we don't have control over what's happening in life with a capital L.
Except for the part we do have control over.
We have control over parts. We have control over our responses, I think, to situations, right?
And we have the possibility to work out, like in the rule of Benedict, make peace your quest and aim. It is extremely hard for me to do in any meaningful way relative to Gaza, let's say, for example,
Sure.
or what's happening in Ukraine. Very, or even in our own country, right? And like, how much can I really do? But what I can do is I can really work at cultivating peace in my own heart. I think it's, James Finley, I love the podcast series, Turning to the Mystics.
Yeah.
And somewhere in my notes, I have the specific citation for this, but he said, the violence of the world is in our own hearts. And I know that's true, right? I know that's true. And then, and hearing that, which I've spent a lot of time ago, like, I kind of do a scan thing, it's like on this table, when you really sand a piece of wood, you like keep running your hand over it, keep sanding down. I mean, I sort of work with my heart in a way like that, but like, what is unsettled right now? Like, what am I not at peace? What ways am I not at peace? And I really work very intentionally to soften that area, which, is often relationship, in some relationship or another, or circumstance, or, like, it's amazing. And always leads to deeper connection.
I think it's just really difficult for most of us to get in touch with that difficulty within us, or even to recognize that whatever the violence in the world is happening is also within us. And then to take the time to actually get in touch with that violence within us is very painful.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, this is why it's great when I work with people in spiritual direction, most people I work with in spiritual direction are also in therapy. So I'm not ever, having to. So they have additional support. But I mean, the things that will wake somebody up in the middle of the night or make it difficult for somebody to sleep, usually that is like pulling, you're sort of pulling the line that will, follow that line, it will lead to a thing that is really a trouble spot in life. And in some ways, in the other one of the other contemplative practices I'm involved with, it's more a meditation practice. I like to refer to it more as trouble spots in life because it kind of diffuses, I can work at having more peace in my life in some simpler way. Like it doesn't have to be, going back and resolving something from, early childhood even. Although it may lead to that, may lead to that, right? And we never really know how a thing will really resolve. But bringing myself to a trouble spot, really seeking peace, like that's my aim. It's really magical. Like it's like the invitation aspect of the third step in Lectio Divina. Like, what's the invitation? Some things are really significant openings, in life.
Yeah.
And I think there are ways to, productive ways to kind of seed those openings. And in contemplative practices do that. We're talking about what you hope people experience or something with Cinema Divina.
Yeah.
And I think part of what Cinema Divina does, these films, most of the Cinema Divina films are autobiographic. In that way, they're autobiographic, kind of almost experimental in a way. They're essayistic or video poetry in a way. But they're autobiographic. So there's some aspect of my life personally, or, something kind of like that. But what happens in this practice is that whatever's going on in that film, by the third step, it really becomes your film. Because it becomes, your story will arise in it, or whatever it is that's speaking to you through this film personally,
Yeah.
it becomes about you at that point.
That's beautiful. There really is like you are giving yourself away in that work. It's like the authorship is becoming, it's not important. It's not even a part of it anymore.
It's really remarkable. I mean, it's so incredible to get to witness. It's really incredible to be present for. Yeah.
Beautiful. We could talk all day, and we have been. But maybe just to wrap up this conversation, maybe just could you offer like a small invitation to people listening to come participate in Cinema Divina?
I would love to. And also, I just want to say thank you, Matt. I mean, thank you for this opportunity. And it's been great to spend a good part of a day with you and to have this conversation with you. So I want to say thank you for this. And also thank SDI for being there, like holding that space for all of us around the world. It's an amazing organization. And to participate in all the ways that one can. And I'm really grateful to you and to all the folks at SDI. And in terms of this opportunity, thank you for the opportunity to do the Cinema Divina stuff. I think we're going to start with two Cinema Divina sessions. So it'll be 2 different films. And what I hope is that for people doing, this is like for people who are practicing spiritual directors, or maybe they're even at this point a little bit retired from spiritual director, or they're aspiring, wherever people are in that. The thing that I find both in my creative life and, as a spiritual director and stuff, I never get too much help. I can't say I'm ever overloaded with inspiration or the feeling of support in my life or great. Like that is something that I think we have an endless capacity for, and I hope that when that people can look forward to joining me in the Cinema Divina practice, and that they get to experience some letting go and some relaxation, and just in that kind of space where they can feel an invitation, whatever that personal invitation might be for them. And often when people engage with the Cinema Divina practice, people do get creatively inspired in particular. But often too, people will be inspired about the different relationships in life, or their own personal practices, or, just something gets resolved, some question that they've had. I mean, the possibilities are probably as many as the people that are in the room,
Yes.
And so I hope that for people that that join us and people that participate, I hope that, it's my intention that it be, revivifying.
I know. What great work.
Really fortifying in that way, just revivifying, and a little bit opens up the imagination a bit and heart. And to be in the company of other people there for similar reasons, I'm sure that alone, becomes a kind of magical space. And healing, there's always the element of healing, I think, in all of this. And it's wonderful to feel that when we're participating in a group,
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want to help us share and spread the word about the life-giving practice of spiritual companionship, you can help us out by subscribing to this podcast on our website. You could give us a like or even write us a review. Thank you for listening. This is Matt Whitney with Spiritual Directors International. Thanks again for listening. Your time and your presence here are deeply appreciated. If you liked this show and would like us to continue making them, please do subscribe now while it's fresh on your mind. Also, we would love to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your comments and suggestions to the email address podcast@sdiworld.org. SDI is the home of spiritual companionship. Learn more about us and our work on our website, sdicompanions.org.